All right, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call this special meeting to order. John, if you could call the roll, please.
Atkins.
Here.
Crawford.
Here.
Deppert. Mark Goddard. Sam Goddard.
Here.
Graff.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Josting.
Here.
Hopkins.
Here.
Longfellow.
Here.
Mennel. Mingus.
Here.
Nelms.
Here.
Paget. Frail. Rich Stinson.
Here.
Schmidtgall.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Sin.
Here.
Chairman Zimmerman.
We have a quorum. We'll do business. We'll rise for the invocation and pledge.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the privilege of gathering together in this free country. And we thank you for the freedoms that you've given us. And I pray that we never take those for granted. And with freedoms come responsibility. And tonight we have a big decision to make before us. I pray that you give us wisdom and discernment, that our conversation and our debate will honor you. I just thank you for these board members and their thoughtfulness. Thank you for our employees and our countywide electeds. Just give us wisdom as we try to do what's best for the taxpayers, and just honor you in all that we say and do. I lift up the victims in Florida, Hurricane Debbie. Just keep them safe as the rain continues to fall. And just thank you for our employees and all the citizens of Tazewell County. We want to honor them in what we do. Pray all this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First order of business is communications from members of the public or county employees that would like to speak. All right, I'm going to allow some latitude further on in the meeting as comments from electeds and what they'd like to say. Any communications from elected and appointed county officials? Brett?
Now or a bit later.
Yeah, it's fine.
You know, I've been talking about some of the money and the different things on these buildings as we've been going now for 10 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years on what we've got to spend and what we have. I still don't feel confident in how much we have for any of it. We've pulled $14 million out of the last day of our budget last year. We've got $19 million from ARPA. We're gonna spend down others everywhere. We're moving it from CIP. We're doing the different things. There's money everywhere. Except I'm not sure it's enough to cover everything that you guys are looking at. And so I'm not going to be talking about which building you decide to send out for bids tonight or do any of the different things. I'm just going to implore you to do some research and make sure that you have asked the questions and are confident in where your money is going to come from and where it is currently. Some of you older ones will remember this. This is a graph that our previous finance chair gave to us 6 years ago. And it was the expectation that our revenues were going to be surpassed by expenditures by the year 2020. Obviously, it didn't happen. Things have changed, gone forth and done. And I provided this, and if I remember correctly from him speaking a little bit ago, Mike told me that he's ready for the answers on the why, and that's great because he should be able to. He can, he knows. Legislation was passed, different things were done, and that makes my point. That was 6 years ago. And so within a 6-year time period, we were projected to have a $2 million deficit right now, and we don't. In fact, you're looking at spending a boatload of money for a new building. But realize how fast that can happen. And if we commit some of these funds to the different things, not knowing how much money is actually out there, what are we gonna have to do in 3 years, in 5 years, if things change again? And are we gonna have to start cutting some budgets? Are we gonna have to make it different, harder on departments? And again, it's not, one building for or against. It's just a matter of, as we go forward in the next 4, 6, 8 years, what do we have to spend at that time? What are you committing now? I've years, it doesn't matter to me. I'm tired of talking about this. Let's just get it done. And those are valid. But for the new people coming on, and for those of us who are going to be here and do care, please think about what you're doing to the rest of it. So that's all I'm simply asking. Just be aware of what you're spending and be mindful of it all.
All right. Anyone else? John?
Not on the building, but an item that might be coming to your attention soon. We are required by the state of Illinois to mail out vote by mail reminder cards. Just a second, sorry. Vote by mail reminder cards to all registered voters before this election. The last couple times, this was new in 2020, and the state statute's clear that it must be mailed to all registered voters. We do get quite a few comments, and I know you guys have in the past, from voters of why am I getting this card? I never requested it. It is a statutory requirement. New this year though, and that's why I wanted to bring it up to you, the Clerks Association did approach the legislatures and got the state law changed so that there is an option on there, I wish to opt out. So if you have individuals who have continually said, I don't want these, why do I get them? They can click that box and we'll never send them one of these again. On the other side as well, any individuals that sign up for permanent vote by mail no longer have a need for these. So we can remove them from our list as well. This is beneficial to us as a county because this was an unfunded mandate. So as you know from the last budget session, it's about $75,000 that we're paying to mail out these vote by mail reminder cards. If we're mailing them to individuals who do not want them, it'd be nice if we could remove them from having to receive these by either clicking I wish to opt out or that I want permanent vote by mail. That way we're lowering our costs going into the future on these. So as these questions come out here by voters over the next couple weeks, as these get put in the mail, August the 12th is when they'll hit the mail. Please remind them of those two options if they are interested. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, moving on, we have an in-place property committee meeting. Chairman Longfellow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Wednesday, August 7th, in-place property. Have a roll call, please.
Chairman Longfellow?
Here.
Vice Chair Vegas?
Here.
Atkins?
Here.
Goddard? Graff?
Here.
Josteen?
Here.
Christensen?
Here.
Schneider?
Here.
Hopkins?
Here.
Yep.
Thank you.
I need a motion for P 24-22 to get this on the floor. Mr. Graff, Mr. Atkins, seconds. Right now, we're gonna have Matt Dickel from the Mold Company, the architectural firm, to give his presentation. We did this motion through property last week. We just wanna do it again now, in case anybody in property wasn't here. And also, for every other county board member, so they can see what we're doing for, the plan for the building. Matt?
Matt, if you want to introduce yourself, I don't know if everybody here knows you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Bickle. I'm architect and partner with Wold Architects and Engineers. I'm also joined tonight by Scott Rickenberg and John Sutherland from PJ Hare. They're the construction managers for the project. We've been working in partnership with them since the onset of our work here a few months ago. So as Mr. Longfellow indicated, I'm here tonight to present to you the work that has taken place over the last several months with the executive group and our core planning group. Those are two groups that have been formed to provide guidance as we work through identifying what are the programmatic needs of a Justice Center Annex. And then the core planning group is an expanded group that includes the elected officials who are stakeholders in that proposed project. And so I want to thank all of the members of both of those groups for their efforts in helping to guide the process to this point. For those who have heard this presentation before, I'm going to start by sort of highlighting, as we've gotten into this, we have identified really several design criteria that we have then used to sort of evaluate the merits, pros and cons of the various options that we have been developing and reviewing and evaluating with both the executive group and the core planning group. I believe you all have received this in your packet, so hopefully you can follow along. I will try and zoom in on important pieces of information as best as possible. So, first and foremost of those criteria that we've identified is how does the solution relate to the budget that was established at the onset of the project? There was a total project budget identified of in the range of $32 million to $34.4 million. And I want to clarify from the onset here, the dollar figures that you'll see presented tonight, when we talk about total project cost, that is the anticipated all-in cost for the solutions that we have been evaluating. So not only is it the construction cost, which you will expect to see on bid day as we receive bids from trade contractors, but it's also inclusive of what we would call the project soft costs. So that's the design fees, the construction testing, survey work, geotechnical work, commissioning, those types of things, as well as what we would call FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So that means that the buildings will be completely outfitted with furniture, technology, monitors on walls, copiers, those types of things. And then the last component of the total project cost is contingency. And at this point in the process, we are carrying approximately a 10% contingency. As we move forward with design, there are more unknowns, right? And so right now we have a 10% contingency to account for things in the design that we're not quite yet anticipating, maybe the soil conditions, those types of things, levels of finishes. But as we move towards bidding, we would see that contingency probably reduce as we enter into construction. So the first, again, criteria was how did the solutions relate to that established budget? As we worked with the core planning group, as we've been evaluating the project's needs, these other criteria have really sort of emerged as the things that we need to make sure are accounted for in the design of the Justice Center Annex. So they are in no particular order. The Times Building property is not required to be acquired. So currently the county has acquired properties, building demolition has occurred. We have been mindful of trying to design the building such that as part of an initial phase of construction, no additional property would need to be acquired at this time, leaving in place the opportunity that as a future phase or future needs of the county develop, certainly there is still space on that block that could be acquired for other needs going forward. We want to make sure that the solution creates a secure connection to the Justice Center. So the movement, secure movement of in-custody persons into courtrooms, and making sure that we are following best design practices and state of Illinois Supreme Court requirements for movement of inmates such that they will not come in contact with members of the public or members of the judiciary or staff until they are in a courtroom. So making sure that we are creating that secure connection with that distinct three-way separation as a criteria. We want to create a single point secured public entry. Again, I mentioned we want to achieve that three-way separation. As we started the process, it was identified that there was a minimum requirement that we provide at least 3 criminal courtrooms in the Justice Center Annex. So that was a criteria. As we move forward then, we started looking at what are the options then long-term for satisfying a larger courtroom set. So we have then as a criteria for how can we achieve 6 courtrooms. And you'll see as we go through this, some of the options look at that as future expansion, and some of them look at it as shelled space, so space that would be constructed within the building day one but not fitted out. That would be delayed until the future, and then other options looked at building more courtrooms than 3 as part of the day one. We want to make sure that we achieve satisfying space needs for the state's attorney, probation, and the drug treatment program. The importance of that is that those are spaces that you are currently occupying in the old post office building as well as the Tazewell building, so it's important that as we're bringing new square footage online for the county, we're also reducing the need and the reliance on those other facilities. Likewise then, it's important that we have space within the Justice Center Annex for accommodating the Circuit Clerk's Traffic Division. Obviously that group works very closely with the criminal courts, and so they are a primary tenant that we need to entertain. And then what are long-term the opportunities for bringing the Circuit Clerk's office into the building, at which time any expansion of the building to the full courtroom set may occur, and at which time they would want to move from the courthouse to the new Justice Center Annex. And then finally, what are we leaving open as possibilities for future expandability? Obviously, we want to make sure that we are being thoughtful and mindful of future decisions and future county boards in terms of as things change, how can this building be adapted and expanded to meet those needs in the future? So we want to make sure that we are keeping that at front of mind in all of the solutions that we are looking at. I'll pause there and just see if there are any questions on those criteria. Sir?
On 1, 2, and 3, it says 3 plus future addition. What's future addition mean?
Great question. So those options build 3 courtrooms in the building, and then plan for a future addition to accommodate those additional courtrooms.
You're saying the building will, you could add another floor later?
Another floor, or bump it out to the west, yes.
But you could go up, you're saying?
We've talked about that at great length with our committees, and up is less ideal than out from the perspective of it's significantly more disruptive to the operations of the building, and so.
So does the cost cover going up? The building can hold another floor? Does that 37 or 44 million cost include the structure to hold another floor going up?
No, it does not. It accounts for building outward and rather than upward. Yes, sir.
What is the difference between a shell portion and a future addition? Because there's like a $7 million difference, and the only difference is future addition versus shell. Can you give me the exact what the differences are?
Sure.
Yeah.
The easiest way to explain it is, let's say that I need 10,000 square feet at the end of the day. Okay. A shelled option would be I'm building 10,000 square feet, but maybe only completing 7,000 square feet of that. So everything within that 7,000 square feet would be completely finished out, and then we've got space that it's got a roof, it's got interior walls, mechanical systems in place, but I haven't put carpet, ceiling, lights, the final bells and whistles in terms of the mechanical systems, those types of things, into that space. Versus the other way to go about that was build 7,000 square feet only day one, and then plan a 3,000 square foot addition in the future. And the difference there is that you are, with that 10,000 square foot model, so the shelled option, you are taking advantage of the fact that you're building that additional 3,000 square feet at today's cost, and then you'll be paying the cost to finish it out in the future. Versus the 7,000 square foot plus 3,000 square foot addition in the future, you will be paying that future cost for that full 3,000 square feet.
So just to follow up on that, so the 3 additional courtrooms is those 3 additional shelled courtrooms are what is the big jump, is going to cost $7 million. Is that
is correct?
Yep. Okay, so we're not. I just want to make that clear that we're not going to have. I mean, shelled. I appreciate the shelled definition because I I was thinking it was a little bit more than that, but, thank you, Matt, appreciate it.
Sir?
Just to follow up, that's $7 million adds one floor to the building, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay. On the future additions, that requires, I just wanna make sure everybody's on the same page, that requires that a future county board enter in a new building project and start a new building or new construction project, which would be an addition to this facility we're building. And that would also require additional property acquisition, am I correct?
To the latter point, absolutely, it would require additional property acquisition. Well, most likely. There is space available, but you would be eating up all of your parking on the site. To your former point, yes, you would have to undertake a construction project. I guess building out space within the shell courtrooms would also be a building project, but of a different ilk.
So options F1, F2, F3, and F5 all require future addition with future property acquisition.
That is correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
One more question for you, thank you. I assume you've designed buildings for government before. This is not the first one you've done, correct?
Yes, thank you for that. So yes, my firm has been in business for since 1968, so
A long time.
a long time. Our work is entirely public sector, and so county and local government makes up a large portion of what we do.
So my follow-up to that is, in your experience or in your company's experience, how often do you see design changes when you're dealing with a board and a committee as large as ours? We've got there are a lot of opinions in the room, right? Do you see a lot of design changes like that in those scenarios?
I guess define design changes.
So, if we get down the process 12, 18 months or something like that, and we have a new idea or a new concept or something we start to see built out doesn't look right or we want to change it, does that happen often?
Well, you always, it is always your prerogative to change the design, right? The impacts are really to schedule and budget. So if we get 12 months down the line and there's a change in thought, or we want to move something around or do something different, we can always do that. How far along in the process we are, obviously, if it's before construction has started, that's easier than if construction has already started. Relative to the shelled space, I'll address that. So, essentially, you'll be building an additional floor on the building if you look at option F5 that will accommodate, in concept, 3 additional courtrooms. You could get down the road, 2, 5, 10 years from now, and decide that 2 additional courtrooms is great, and you still have some additional space. And maybe there's another department or program within the county that would be a great fit for that additional space. It's really tenant build out at that point. So it's not going to be so specifically shelled that it can only ever be a courtroom. You're just building in the future flexibility of expanded use within the footprint of the building without physical addition.
Thank you.
Yes.
In answer to Max's question on contingency, the experience I've had, 10% is an average figure, and we usually go over it on major building projects. The second thing is, you put 3 plus future addition, that looks like a positive, and future addition is not a positive, it's an extra cost. On all those, it said future addition. It's kind of misleading.
That's why it's in red. Red is typically in.
Well, so the 3 courtrooms are in red, or? So that's how I read it, so, but I think we'll go over the 10% contingency.
I'll let Scott and John respond as well, but our experience in new construction is we typically average, less than 1% in total change orders from bid day.
Mike, I think when we built this jail, we had 4% is what our contingency spending was.
did I understand you correctly to say that in F4 or the shell options, the interior walls would be put in? And if so, why? Why not just leave it open? So,
Yeah, no, they wouldn't, the interior walls within a shelled space wouldn't be constructed. So, you know, courtroom is rather a contained space, but actually when we're talking about shelling courtroom spaces, you know, we're talking about judges' chambers and jury deliberation rooms and, you know, all of the court support spaces that go along with those courtrooms. When we talk about shelled, and here I'm gonna just advance here real quickly to a good page to look at this. Oops. Sorry. So this is option F5, in which case we would be shelling courtrooms on this second level. Essentially, everything in the kind of yellow color at the top of the plan would need to be constructed. That's public corridor and circulation space. Everything sort of behind that corridor wall, those walls by and large wouldn't exist. You know, the elevator cores and those types of things obviously would go up, but we wouldn't be building out you know, those judges' chambers at the back of the space. It would just be an open floor plan. Everything beyond the public corridor would be you know, basically a vanilla box. Yes, sir.
I've got a bunch of questions, all about courtrooms.
Okay.
So I've heard you say C3, I've heard you say 6. That makes me wonder if somebody else has another number. I want to know how those numbers of courtrooms were decided. I want to know how many I'm not even sure who's running the thing, because I haven't been to a meeting. But I want to know, because I haven't been invited to a meeting. I would have gone to any meeting that I was invited to. So I want to know how you determine that we need courtroom 1, courtroom 2. Pretty much talk to me about courtrooms, because they seem to be a big anchor in this, and they also drive huge costs. Thanks.
Absolutely. So as we got into this, there was an original sort of stated program that the Justice Center Annex wanted to replace your current court's facility. And so the original number that we were talking was 6 courtrooms, because you have 6 courtrooms in the courthouse today. As we came on board and with the construction manager, you know, it came to everyone's very stark reality awareness that the budget that was set was not going to support 6 courtrooms. It was not going to support the full construction of the full programmatic needs of the circuit clerk. And so we started to identify what are the minimum requirements that we need to satisfy with this building in order for it to function properly. Because of its connection to the jail and that in-custody movement piece that I discussed, it was identified that at a minimum, we wanted to satisfy replacing the criminal courts. And so when I talk about criminal courts, that's traffic, misdemeanor, and felony courts. So it sort of established that the minimum criteria for the building was to have those 3 courtrooms so that we could facilitate that in-custody movement from the jail into the courtroom without reliance on putting folks in a van in the Sally Port and driving them over to the McKenzie building and then bringing them through the tunnel and then bringing them up a public elevator, which is your current state. So 3 is kind of where we started. As we continued to have dialogue with the stakeholder groups, it was identified that a 4th courtroom to satisfy juvenile, which is also part of the criminal courts system, although that not reliant so much on the in custody movement piece of it, would really ideally be located in this building as well, if we could. And so we began looking at options as to how could we expand to additional courtrooms. And that's really where we sort of moved into looking at options for shelling the full courtroom need, and number of courtrooms is driven by number of judges, and number of judges is driven by the state. So currently, within your district, they have assigned 6 judges to Tazewell County. So that's kind of how we've arrived at that number.
I don't know, who do I need to seek permission to talk? You, Dave, or?
It's probably Greg.
You, Greg? Yeah. May I ask another question? About courtrooms?
Sure.
So, can a courtroom serve multi-purpose? For example, could that room that's called a courtroom sometimes be a courtroom for adults and sometimes be a courtroom for juveniles?
The simple answer is yes. The needs of a criminal courtroom versus the needs of a juvenile courtroom can vary slightly, but there's flexibility typically within the footprint of that courtroom that you could set it up either way.
Can I just say something on that?
Of course.
That issue, though, is not practical if you're having trials and schedules and people coming from somewhere. So I do not. So when you're saying that,
yeah, I
theoretically it's possible, but how scheduling works, we have downtime, but we don't know when that's going to be. So that would be a very difficult hope and prayer.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Judge. I'll add on to my comment. My response was based on if a courtroom today is being used as a criminal courtroom, could it in the future be used as a juvenile courtroom? To the judge's point, trying to do that on Tuesdays it's juvenile, on Wednesdays it's criminal, on Thursdays it's misdemeanor. That would obviously be a scheduling challenge, and that's why best practice is to try and to have one dedicated courtroom per function.
I would like to also add that we have not determined the size of all courtrooms too. So when we talk about conservativeness, we're talking about, these are the way we can be more conservative. We can do some more thinking. These right now are all the same size, 6 courtrooms in the budget. And that the conservative part is, trying to get the first 3 built to begin with as close to the budget as possible. So, and then move on to the next 3 later.
Thank you, because that was one of my next ones. But, so, did I understand you to say that the original was 3, and the reason is that was budget supported, and the 6 were not budget supported? But maybe I didn't hear you right.
I wouldn't say that 3 or 6 were necessarily the driving factor in budget supported. Talking a little bit off the cuff here, but you could potentially build 6 courtrooms within budget, but would have no budget left over for the state's attorney or probation, or some of those spaces. So when we landed on 3, we looked at the space needs of all of the different stakeholders, and not only the space needs, but also the operational requirements of those groups. And so it's imperative that the state's attorney have a presence in the building where criminal courts are taking place. And so that piece of it goes with whatever complement of courtrooms we end up with, whether it's 2, 4, 6. Also we had the criteria of trying to eliminate your use of the post office and the Tazewell building. So again, that was a driver of why state's attorney and probation had to have a footprint in this building. And so it was not necessarily that 3 courtrooms was what was only budget supported, but it was identified that as we were looking at the whole wall of wax, 3 was sort of the minimum requirement in conjunction with those other minimum requirements.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, sir.
The ARP committee was organized, and we sit down and set 2 or 3 or 4 goals. And one of the top goals was this building. And the needs for this building was 3 criminal courts, so transportation of prisoners was a key issue, and empty the Tazewell building and empty the old post office. And that was what the project was set up for. And that was the start through the ARPA committee. Now it's expanded to the 6 or 7 different examples you've got. But it started out with 3 courtrooms, post office, and Tazewell building.
Like, along with that lines, Mike, is the fact that we did the 3 courtrooms and the probation and the state's attorney, and it's over budget. So when it was over budget by several million, so that's why we started thinking out of the box with the shelling process or not shelling process, and building 1 building now or 2 buildings with the 2nd building later. So this is kind of, the initial thing is criminal courts, right? And then probation, and that's what we're trying to do with, you could either do with F3 and build another building later, or F4. You know, so that's kind of where we fulfilled all the agreements that we had out of ARPA direction from executive committee with these scenarios. Matt, I was wondering if you could kind of move forward, so maybe we could answer some more questions as you're talking. So
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg. So, F3 was really developed as that solution for achieving that minimum program of 3 criminal courtrooms connected to the Justice Center Annex with space for the state's attorney, probation, the drug treatment program, and the circuit clerk's traffic division. As you can see, the cost of F3 was $37.7 million. That was the estimate that was developed for the total project cost. And so we knew right there that we were looking at a solution that did not satisfy our first criteria of the budget. And so we came back to the group and said, well, we have some options for you as to how we might be able to save some money. And so we looked at an option F1 that would shell the state's attorney space, probation space, and drug treatment space. So by doing that, you would have a total project cost that fell within the budget, but it would fail to satisfy the criteria of moving out of the post office and the Tazewell building. Having a criminal courts, or a Justice Center Annex with criminal courts programmed that did not include the state's attorney and did not account for relocation of probation. The group felt that that was not an option that they were willing to support. Option F2 then looked at, well, what if we could move the state's attorneys in but leave probation in the post office? And again, that was looked at as an option that was not supported, although it did come in right at the sort of the high end of the budget that was identified. So then we were really back to F3, and F3 was sort of the option that again, we were sort of moving in that direction with, I think, some consensus until we really started having some conversations about the future needs for the courts and the identification that 4th courtroom is probably going to be something that is needed sooner rather than later in this building, and so how can we look at accommodating that? And with that, really sort of became the development of option F4, which again looks at how could we build 3 courtrooms day 1 and then have shelved space for 3 additional courtrooms down the road, with the idea that, again, we know that this is an option that is obviously going to cost more than what was originally identified, but it's trying to be forward thinking in terms of we're going to build the infrastructure today for what we know we're going to need in the future, at today's cost, rather than deferring that down the road, giving you then the latitude really to determine at what pace and at what time you bring those additional spaces on board. You know, if it were a 3 courtroom addition, it's really going to probably be all at once. You don't build 1 courtroom and then build another courtroom and another courtroom as additions. With the shell space, you have that option, right? You can build out one 5 years from now, the second one 20 years from now. I mean, the space is there. You've built it, and it's never going to be less costly to build that space than it is today. So that was really the convention that drove the development of F4, and why I think the core planning group ultimately felt that that was a very strong position for the county to take in the long term, so that you're really setting yourselves up for future needs. Yes, sir.
What is the cost of the 3+ future addition? Just that, it's in the first 3, and I'm just trying to figure out what does, you've got the 6 total courtrooms line, what does 3+ future addition actually cost out of the 37 million in F3?
So the future addition is not in that cost. All that is in the cost that's presented is the initial 3 courtrooms.
That's in F3. So F3 is building a separate building, which will be a whole other building later on in life.
So
F4, I think we have an estimated cost to add it. If we have the shelled F4, we have an estimated cost of 3 to 5 million.
Okay, so
Maybe what Mike D was at 3
well,
to 5 million.
it's
or?
like 7 million on the sheet between F3 and F4 for shell.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about the overall cost.
Yes, I'm talking about overall cost. Yeah. So it looks like, so F3, just so that I'm looking at this right, checks a lot of the boxes, right? Other than future planning, that's it. We get 3 courtrooms, we empty, the state's attorney moves over, drug treatment moves over, traffic court moves over, and the future expandability is considered. So we really check all of the boxes in F3.
Yes, if we accept that the 3 courtroom minimum is the minimum, which is kind of where the moving target has been.
That would put us at 10 total courtrooms in Tazewell County. 3 in this one and 7 in the courthouse.
Yes.
Thanks.
That's just theoretically, because we're gonna backfill the space in the courthouse. There's not gonna remain courtrooms infinitely, And then the second thing is, and I was gonna bring this up later, we'll be paying for 2 sets of security, one at the old courthouse, one at the new courthouse, which is about $450,000 a year into the future. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
Question then, if we're going to backfill the courthouse, then why wouldn't we put the people from the post office and the Tazewell building in there?
I think the reasoning behind some of the state's attorney's offices in the post office, and they need to be in the criminal courts building, which would be the annex. The second reason is we're trying to move out of the post office, and that's for probation. And probation wants to be in a secure building, and we're putting them in the bottom level of the probation office so that people can come out of their courts straight to probation in the same building. So that's the ideal thoughts, and then we'll be removing everybody out of the post office. We will be moving public defender out of Tazewell Bank building into the state's attorney's office in the post office. That's the plan for them.
Into the state's attorney's space in the courthouse.
I'm sorry. Current courthouse. Public defender in the state's attorney's space at the current courthouse. Sorry.
So let me walk you through the option F sort of series here. So with any of the option 1, 2, F1, 2, and 3, you have sort of the same schematic site plan here. So obviously we're looking at the property across the street. The main entrance to the new Justice Center Annex would be oriented off of Capitol Street, across from the courthouse. We would be looking to set up that as the primary public entrance, create on-street parking sort of similar to what is in front of the Justice Center today. There has been, and I'm sure some have heard, discussion obviously in the past about the concept of closing Elizabeth Street. We have determined that there's an option that can be achieved that would allow us to not close Elizabeth Street. So you see a sort of light orange connection between the Justice Center and the annex. That is a below-grade tunnel that would cross below the street and connect for in-custody movement to the Justice Center Annex. This is the lower level of options F1, 2, and 3. As Mr. Longfellow indicated, that is space that is largely occupied by the probation services. There would be a entrance from the grade level to get down to the lower level here, but this would be primarily space for probation, and then there is some support space for the sheriff's office, for court security and the bailiffs, as well as some archive storage. The rest of the space then in the dark gray would be your mechanical and electrical rooms, your IT rooms, and then general storage for the building. Again, you see the light gray, that is that in-custody tunnel, and that supports sort of a square in the middle of the space. That's your vertical circulation for in-custody movement. And so folks would come across from the Justice Center through that tunnel and then up through an elevator that, as we go up in the plan, you will see is located in between pairs of courtrooms on subsequent floors so that we can accommodate that three-way separation and movement of folks without having any violations of our three-way separation. So this is the main level of the building. So you see on the right-hand side, the east side of the building would be our public entry. So all public coming to the building would enter through that public lobby and screening area. So this is intended to be fully secured building. So during open hours, everybody coming to the building would have to come through that entrance, be screened by court security before being able to access any of the functions within the building. One of the logistical things with this building that we've spent time talking through with both the sheriff as well as probation is how are we going to accommodate some of the after hours and weekend functions of probation. And so you'll see to the north of that public lobby there is a secure after hours probation entrance. The idea being that, again, during normal court hours, that would be completely locked down. Anybody coming to probation during normal courthouse hours would still come through that main public entry. There would be doors then to the north that would allow them into that secondary lobby, and then they would be able to go down to probation services. After hours then, we would completely lock down that upper vestibule from all other areas of the building. People would be able to come in there. They would be able to go down the elevator, but that is all of the areas they would be able to access within the building. There would be no opportunities for them to get anywhere else in the building. Once you are through screening, then you are into sort of the public circulation areas of the courtroom. That is all in the lighter yellow color. So that is stairs, elevators, courtroom waiting areas, restrooms. And then the areas in orange are really the programmatic spaces. So here on the lower level, immediately adjacent to that public lobby is the Circuit Court Traffic Division. That is adjacent then to the traffic court. Traffic court being, obviously a very high volume space. It's important to have that on the lower level and have that direct connection to the Circuit Clerk's Traffic Division offices. You see that light gray area in the middle, that is the vertical circulation core for in-custody movement. So again, folks will come from the jail up through that elevator and then be able to be held there in holding areas until which time they are called upon to appear in a courtroom. So that you can see that there's access from that gray area to courtrooms on either side. There's also then the misdemeanor court is planned currently on the first floor. Again, we are using relatively generic blocks to delineate the space for the courtrooms. As we get further into design, the specific widths, lengths, numbers of meeting rooms, etc., associated with each one are likely to change slightly based on the programmatic needs of each court. But for now, misdemeanor court is located on the first floor along with traffic. And then everything behind the courtrooms to the south, you'll see another corridor. That is a secure corridor, so nobody from the public can get to that. That is entirely where our judges' chambers, jury deliberation rooms, court reporter type spaces will occur. Sort of rounding out then the lower level, we've got space for court administration. We have space for pretrial services, which is currently within probation, but we are looking to create a space separate from probation, accessible to the public on the main floor because of some anticipated legislative changes that we believe the state will eventually take over those functions, and so it makes sense not to have them located with probation. And then we have some building support spaces, so receiving, loading dock type area, etc. And then to the bottom left of the plan, you'll see the secured staff entrance. So on that site plan, staff parking is anticipated in a lot to the west of the building. Staff will be able to access entrance the building here, move vertically within the building with a secured staff elevator and stair to access their areas of the building without having to come through the public entrance.
Yeah, I just first noticed this, so the tunnel, walkway, whatever you want to call it, is not within the building, it's actually outside of the building, is that correct?
It is correct.
Thank you.
As we move up a floor then, in this option, that third courtroom is stacked above the misdemeanor courtroom, so that would be the felony courtroom here. Again, you see that the gray circulation in custody core supports that courtroom as well. We've got the similar court support spaces in the secured corridor behind the courtrooms. The public facing side of the building is similar. Again, it's going to be your courtroom waiting areas, your public restrooms, stairs, and elevators. And then on this floor, we introduce the space for the state's attorney's office, as well as space for jury assembly and grand jury. Option 4, F4 then, looks at adding another level to that building. And so this is entirely to support that those 3 additional courtrooms. And so it would be basically taking that same footprint below, extending it up, having 2 courtrooms that are supported by that in-custody core, the 3rd courtroom to the far right, the court support spaces in the secured corridor to the south of the courtrooms, and then some additional shelved space for expanded jury assembly. One of the concessions with options F1 through F3 is we are kind of relying on space shared between what was identified as the jury assembly space as well as overflow into the grand jury space. There's an opportunity here to create some additional space here to alleviate having to have that shared functionality. So those are options F1 through F4. Option F5 is very similar, but does not accommodate those shelved courtrooms. So again, from a lower level perspective, it is ostensibly the same, although laid out a little bit different with probation services, space for court security and the bailiffs, state's attorneys, archive storage, and then your mechanical, electrical rooms, IT, and building storage spaces. Again, first floor is going to be very similar as well in terms of 2 courts, traffic court, or I'm sorry, circuit clerk, traffic division, all of the court support spaces, all of the building support spaces. The difference really becomes in F5 that on the second floor, we're building a 4th courtroom in this original footprint, which then displaces where in F4 we had state's attorney on the second floor, so it forces us to go to another floor to accommodate the state's attorney's office. You'll also notice that in that basement level there was a reduced area designated for mechanical systems and storage in order to sort of compress the footprint of the lower levels so that everything stacks vertically, so we end up needing to move some of that space to the upper floor. So the big differences then between F5 and F4 and F5 is F5 you are getting 4 courtrooms day 1, and any courtrooms after that would be an expansion to the west. In F4 you are getting 3 courtrooms fully constructed day 1 with space built on that upper level for 3 additional courtrooms. F3 then being you are building 3 courtrooms, not constructing those shelved courtrooms on the upper level and planning for future expansion.
Mr. Atkins? I've got the schematics here in front of me,
Yep.
and I couldn't quite read what was up there, but on my F5 second level floor plan, it says shelved future and then parentheses juvenile court. And that doesn't sound like a completed courtroom.
Thank you for that
Is it just a
clarification.
mistake on the schematic?
No, that we are building space for that 4th courtroom, but it would not be constructed fully built out on day 1 per the budget that has been presented. Thank you for that clarification.
So, if I could follow up on the chart here, it says 4 plus future addition with regards to total courtrooms. It doesn't say shelved. I'm not understanding the drawings you're showing us and your summary of them they're not really matching up.
You're correct relative to option F5. It really should, obviously in a matrix we're sort of limited to the amount of information that we can play or fill into these boxes. It really should be 3 plus 1 shell plus future addition.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I hadn't thought to ask this before on the circuit clerk, because looking at that, and I know we talked about having the ability to take payments, so they're kind of on the east side of the building, but addition would have to happen on the west. So if there's ever an addition to add the circuit clerk on any of these, even on F4, it would have to be separated, I guess. Is that something that would work for them? Would that just be a single floor as an example in F4? How much in conversations been there?
Yep, so we've talked about that with the circuit clerk. Even in a building scenario where we were looking to construct all of the circuit clerk's footprint day 1 within the building, it's an important adjacency for their traffic division to be wherever the traffic court is because of the synergies of the workflow and then obviously the payment process, right? Not to put words in the circuit clerk's mouth, but I think it was agreed that relative to the other functions of the circuit clerk's office, they're okay with those being remote from the traffic division.
So there would never be, because we've got that it doesn't work and it'd have to be a future edition. I guess it doesn't say future edition, so that would just, they would long term be staying put for that part of that part of what they're doing. Then, or we would
You're right. No,
eventually.
it could say future edition as well. You have that, yeah, absolutely.
So long-term, if that were ever done, that would be then built on the west, just a single floor, I guess, is that F4 as an example? Since you already have the courtrooms, you wouldn't need it.
Yeah, with F4, it would probably, well, it could be configured, I guess, a couple different ways. In terms of the overall addition, it could be multi-story, it could be single-story.
Are you finished, Matt? Or do you have any more questions for Matt? Mr. Atkins?
I just want to follow up on F5. Since one of those courtrooms will be shelled, the juvenile courtroom, the 45 million is actually not the correct figure if we would have 4 current courtrooms. Do we know what it would cost for the shelled courtroom to be finished? So the F5, if it actually had 4 courtrooms once constructed, 4 functioning courtrooms, do we know what that figure would be?
Yeah, I'm gonna look to John or Scott. We've talked about that, and I don't want to misquote it, but
Yeah, it's about 2.5 million. About 2.5 million, 2 million to 2.5.
Additional to the 45? Okay, thank you.
Yes, we didn't pay much attention to F5 after when we saw the numbers on it, considered F4, so that's why we didn't focus on that 4th juvenile court. Yes, Greg?
Sounds like 47.5 million.
Yes, Matt, on option F4, describe the scenario of a shelled, one of the shelled courtrooms coming into, sounds like we need one more quick, so describe so would all the tan be developed right away, and then one of the darker red would describe the scenario of a courtroom, say number 4 coming up shortly, and then leaving 5 and 6 by itself, by shell.
yeah, so I don't want to step away from the microphone, otherwise I would point at the screen. So again, the boundary of the orange color or the dark red, separating it from the yellow above, would be constructed as part of the original construction. So if somebody did find their way onto this floor, you know, they wouldn't be able to, you know, get into any trouble. They would, you know, be within a public corridor. So there would be a full wall, you know, sort of built, separating everything in the orange from the public circulation areas. At which time a decision to construct, you know, the juvenile courtroom was made. Then within, you know, that footprint of that area on this floor, you know, they would go about constructing additional, you know, partition walls, you know, as appropriate to build out the spaces that were identified as needed at that time. The rest of the shelled spaces then would just remain as shelled.
Mr. Harris?
I see the shell space as a problem in the future, because if there's space, people take it. We've got examples in the county here where there's areas that are misused on the space side. So if we leave that space empty for 3 or 4 years, people start moving into it. Storage, whatever. And the time we want to move the juvenile court, if we do, we'll have to build another building to move what's in there out. And I've seen that also.
He's right. I would hope to think that before when we shelled out the 3rd floor, we wouldn't be heating and cooling it and all that stuff. We'd be keeping that under just climate control at the beginning, to where nobody would be wanting to be in there. As far as storage, of course, we just have to not allow it. But until we get ready to build the juvenile court, then we'll fire up the 3rd floor and build it, and then continue on. Which I do agree that the fact that
that would be our first next step, as soon as the building did get built, is to focus on that 4th juvenile court room. Any other questions from Matt? Mr. Hopkins?
Just quickly to that point, I would imagine, maybe not as much in heating, but we would probably need to cool it, just for humidity aspect, I would imagine, at least.
Yeah, again, you're gonna be building, mechanical and, electrical rooms and sizing those services to accommodate this down the road, right? That's part of the project, is building the infrastructure that would support, completing these spaces. So yes, we will have the opportunity to heat and cool those spaces, but it would be, probably there would be an air handling unit that was designated to serve that area. It could run at a different set point. We're not going to be doing all of the distribution duct work because we don't know the final configuration of the space yet. So there's probably one large duct that's dumping heating or cooling, into that space. But absolutely, the space needs to be conditioned. You don't want to have an unconditioned space. It'd be like having an attic that was, in the middle of the building. So.
Also, as a second thought, I was thinking that I think we have the possibility to just shut off the elevator to each floor too, so we could shut off the elevator to that
Yes,
floor.
absolutely. Yeah.
Any other thoughts, questions for Matt? If not, we'll move along with this resolution. This resolution is from Property Committee, moving forward to the County Board. P24-22, I'd like to take a vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing that, that's approved. No unfinished business, no new business. We'll move over and recess and send it back to the County Board.
All right, as somebody pointed out, that brings us to the consent agenda. Any items to be pulled off? All right. So, we are back in full committee, or full board. I do have kind of a lot of notes that I just would like to make some comments, but before I do that, I don't know if State's Attorney or the Sheriff or Judge Gorman or Doskotz would like to say some words about this facility.
Like a motion to get it on the floor.
Oh, yeah, can I get a motion to get what just came out of property on the floor? Motion by Atkins, second by Deppert. Okay. And if you don't mind coming up and using the microphone, that makes it a lot easier for those watching online. Judge Gorman, if you could just introduce yourself, that'd be great.
You bet. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kate Gorman, and I'm the Chief Judge of the 10th Judicial Circuit, which is Peoria, Tazewell, Marshall, Stark, and Putnam. But what you may not know about me is I'm a lifelong Tazewellian. So when I'm speaking on behalf of the judiciary, along with a tax-paying resident of Tazewell. And I'm going to just add this one more little fact for those of you who don't know. My dad, Judge John Gorman, was the resident Tazewell judge from 1980 to 2000. So I am a uniquely situated person. And speaking on behalf of the judiciary, I love the old courthouse. It's 108 years old. It's passed us by. And you as a board have the opportunity to build a courthouse for the future generations. And that courthouse has passed us by. As a proud Tazewellian, our population is growing. We're busy as ever. And I've been a judge for 17 years, so I've seen how the law has evolved. And yes, technology is important, but it has a time and a place. And I have been involved in statewide development of Zoom technology and its use in the court. And yes, it does have a time and a place, but it does not replace courtrooms, court personnel, and the importance of being able to bring justice to the citizens of Tazewell. So, do we have Zoom? Yes. Is it used for the most perfunctory, simple matters? Yes. If there's anything with any meat on its bones, people are there. People are arguing, and people want to have that environment. It's important. And so as you consider this, speaking from the judiciary's perspective, obviously, we would like to take advantage of being efficient with 6 courtrooms under one roof. It would be better for everyone if that's something that we can do. We appreciate all of the efforts that you as the county board, property committee, Greg Longfellow, all the efforts that have been made, the blood, sweat, and tears, and I've really enjoyed working with the stakeholders, and I feel like this is something that could change the trajectory for Tazewell and its citizens. Justice is important, and you have the opportunity to do that. And I'll turn it over to the state's attorney and ask him to step forward. Thank you.
While Kevin's making his way forward, I want to acknowledge our friends in Pekin who have been wonderful partners through this process, and we appreciate all your help that you've given us thus far. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Kevin Johnson, State's Attorney and a proud resident of Washington. I know Kate probably wouldn't want to mention it, but I will. Not only is she the chief judge of our circuit, she's what we call the chief of the chiefs. So she's actually the head of the chiefs of the organization of all the chief judges throughout the state of Illinois. So she is very tied into what's going on, not only within our circuit, but also within the state of Illinois. So I appreciate her input. Obviously, I agree with everything she said, and really only want to make a couple of comments to you tonight. And obviously, this comes just as a stakeholder, as to one of the persons who might be in the new annex. I do appreciate all the access that the stakeholders have gotten, not only myself, the sheriff, our circuit clerk, Mr. Hobson, John, our court services. We very much appreciate the work they've done and that they've listened to what our needs are, not only now, but hopefully for in the future. So I would only make a few brief comments regarding how the annex would impact my office as state's attorney. You know, selfishly and practically, my hope would be that we would have 4 courtrooms up and running in the criminal annex, felony, misdemeanor, traffic, and juvenile. And I add juvenile in there because there's 2 aspects to juvenile court. There's abuse and neglect, and then there's what we call delinquency. So juveniles who are charged with criminal offenses are delinquency, and then abuse and neglect, basically, essentially, that's what it is, abuse and neglect. And unfortunately, caseload is growing. At one point in time, our misdemeanor court and juvenile court were combined in one courtroom with 1 judge. I think it was like 2 years ago, we had to move out of that because of the increase in abuse and neglect and delinquency cases. So we have to have 1 dedicated courtroom, 1 dedicated judge for juvenile court now. Which is unfortunate because for my whole 36 years, or 34 years of it, you know, juvenile was what you would call a part-time court. Unfortunately, no more. Abuse and neglect has grown dramatically, and I relate a lot of that to our methamphetamine issue, because when we have addictions and things in homes, there's children in those homes, so we're dealing with that. But what also concerns me a little bit more is our delinquency. And this is my best guess from being around for a while, our friends in Springfield, or some from the northern part of the state, are bound and determined to continue raising the age, what you call majority, or who is a delinquent, right? It used to be 16 and under, then it moved up. And one of their suggestions was they wanted to make anyone under 21 years of age have to be dealt with in juvenile court. That's not a good thing, because as you know, unfortunately our society is changing. The offenses that children, juveniles are now committing are changing, as you can see every day when you read in the court or in the paper, in the news, the types of offenses they're committing. You know, when I was younger, and perhaps some of you, the worst thing that maybe a juvenile would do is maybe do a retail theft or maybe do a joyride in a car. But now, unfortunately, a lot of the offenses include weapons and things of that nature. In fact, we've lately, as you know, had to elevate several juveniles up to adult court to be prosecuted for murder. And as you know, over in Peoria County, they even have that issue a lot more than we do. My point being, I am a little bit concerned about that increase because I believe there's going to be continued push in legislation to raise the age of juveniles. And every year it goes up. It's now under 18. For a long time it was 16 under, then it went to 17, now it's 18, but their push was 21, and then negotiated down to 18. So every year we go up, there's just many more serious cases we have in juvenile court. I don't believe their push is going to stop. I think they're going to continue to push to keep raising the age of majority or up. And even if it goes up to 18, that's going to dramatically the number of delinquency cases that we have to deal with. And especially if they just keep going to 19, 20. So down in the future, that's one reason I am a little bit concerned about that. I think we're going to have to continue to have a dedicated juvenile court. And when they are in custody, when they're in the detention center and they're brought over to us, they are in custody, and they have special rules for juveniles in custody. They can't be within sight or sound of adults, so you have to keep them totally separate. Obviously, if all the adults are over in the annex, it's a little bit easier over in the old courthouse to do that. But it's one thing that was kind of hoping that we would have all 4 of those courtrooms in the annex, and I understand that. Selfishly, I also wanted all 4 courtrooms over there because then my entire office would be there and we wouldn't be split up. So all the administrative assistants and everything would be in one location. But I also understand the practicalities of the matter and cost, and I understand that. So that's why, in a way, I kind of like F4 because maybe we have a potential of getting juvenile court over to where I hope and where I think it needs to be sooner. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, F3, we can make that work as well. We'll just continue having juvenile over in the old court, and I'll just have to have that part of our office move from the old post office over into the old courthouse, which we can do. Other than that, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Seeing none, I'm going to sit down.
Anyone else? Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, I'm gonna support F3, and I'm not gonna support F4. Original need was set up for 3 courtrooms and empty the 2 buildings. And I think we go beyond that. We're trying to satisfy wants rather than needs. I have concerns on the dollars that we're spending. We don't have 37 million set aside. We've got 34. So we're gonna pull 3 million from the general fund, and I could vote for that, but to pull any more out could hurt us. We had a all-facility review on the buildings to see what our needs were on the buildings, and I haven't heard what that is, but I'm sure there's building needs, and that's going to be a cost that we should address. The major concern, on any option that we have, is our revenue sources to cover our increased expenses such as the maintenance, manpower for maintenance increase, security, certain clerks may add another person. Then we're gonna have a increase in utilities, insurance, the $250,000 a year for insurance and general maintenance. I haven't heard how we're gonna cover that, and do we have the revenue sources to cover that if we do build a new building?
So we'll address some of those, but I think Sheriff, you wanted to speak also?
Hi everyone, I'm basically just going to talk about court security. Next month, September, I'll have been at the Sheriff's Office for 36 years. I've been in and around the courthouse that entire time. We've had numerous upgrades. I wrote the grant that put 3 deputies in the courthouse. I was part of the first group that set up the security checkpoint. I helped with the policies. Since becoming the chief deputy, I designed the current court security checkpoint. I wrote the policies, and I manage the courthouse. The care and custody of the courthouse is by statute a responsibility of every sheriff. That is my responsibility. What that means, if something bad happens over there, it's my fault. It doesn't matter who does it, what it is. I'm supposed to be able to look in my crystal ball and see where we need to go to fix the problems. Well, as Judge Gorman said, the courthouse is 108 years old. When it was built, there were 33,000 people in this county, which upwards to 135,000 now. And I don't think anybody had a crystal ball back then and could see what we need to do now. The court security in the courthouse, we do the best that we can with what we have. We have upgraded, continually tried to train. But to just go through a typical day of court, we'll have our court officers from the jail, they load up about 10 inmates in the Sallyport in a van. They drive them to the old Sallyport in the old jail, and they're all handcuffed together with 2 correctional officers. They go downstairs through the tunnel into the one small elevator that's in the courthouse. They take them to whatever courtroom, which is usually 308, whatever floor they need to go to, through all of the public, through the family, through the victims, through the witnesses, and we have to transport them through there. There have been issues in the past. There have been issues in the past week or so up in the courtroom with some of the inmates. And we manage the best we can. But it seems there's a trend that things seem to be getting a little more violent. People seem to be getting a little more outgoing and willing to buck the system and cause problems. I've got 3 judicial orders on my desk today banning 3 people from the courthouse. I haven't seen one of those in 10 years, and 2 of them have been within the last week. And it's because of the problems that are going on in there. There's only so much we can do with the building we have. Not to mention the judges have to go down these same elevators, through these same people, the victims, the witnesses. We can't keep them separate. This is one big open building. So I'm not saying that this courthouse is not functioning. It's just very, very difficult to try and stay on top of everything. So that was the only topic that I had to talk about, was the security, and I'm hoping not to get sued before the end of my career, because if so, something really bad has happened over there. So we'll keep trying to manage with what we have.
Right, other questions, comments? Max?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by saying that I am not against building a building. I am just against building this building. This $44 million F4, which is what's on our agenda tonight to approve, correct? Okay. for a few reasons. It is $10 million over budget. $7 million only gets us 3 shell courtrooms, 7 of the 10. We don't even get 6 ready-made courtrooms on day 1, and we spend an additional $7 million from F3. We then will have between $6 and $7 million in courthouse renovations of the old courthouse, bringing the total project up somewhere around $51 million if we go with F4. This building will take us down to a 50% fund balance. The difference between 50 and our court and our county financial policy of 33% is roughly $7 million. That's just not very much. And really the last and probably the most important thing for me, other than that it's really over budget, and I haven't seen this board in the 2.5 years I've been here go even $10 over budget or try really hard not to. We're using $24 million of taxpayer money. The big argument for this building originally was that it was going to be mainly federal stimulus money. Until last year, when we moved over, which I think in good faith, $14 million into the CIP fund for a budget. I think we all thought, yeah, that's gonna be pretty close. And Matt, to his point, said that when they sat down and started penciling this thing out, it was not gonna satisfy the needs. And that's too bad. And I don't love that. I would love to support this. This is the largest construction project since the last courthouse. I would love to be on board for this thing. This is so cool. It is going to take us into the future. I would love to do that. But I can't justify $24 million of Tazewell County taxpayer dollars. I just can't. I don't think that we have to do that. I think justice is important, like Judge Gorman said. I think she's spot on. Sheriff, spot on. It's just not the only thing we do here. It's just not. And so my plea to you tonight is that the conversation doesn't have to end here. We can turn this down tonight and go back to the drawing board. You heard the state's attorney say he can work with F3. We don't have to go $7 million over. We don't have to go $10 million over budget. He can work with F3. So there's play in these 3 plans that we can do. So my plea to you would just be to turn this down. We don't have to commit this much money tonight. We can work on these other schematics and come up with something that's a little bit more budget friendly and try not to blow out our reserves and put ourselves in a position where we may not be able to do the things we want to do 5-10 years down the road. I hope I'm still around. I hope we can give raises and invest in technology and continue to upgrade the facilities we have. I'm a little bit afraid we won't be able to do that on F4. And that's my ask. Thank you.
Other comments? And by the way, you'll have renovation costs under F3 also. So we'll at least be able to afford it. Other comments, Greg?
Yeah, I'm the guy that when the questionnaire or the survey went out, said I won't approve anything over 30 million. And but a lot's happened since then. And I try and look at things big picture, future. And I just think if we, with the proposed plan, or the one that I guess we're going to be voting on, we're planning so that, in 5 years, if we need to do this, it'll be easier to do. If we put this off and plan for a future edition where you have to go down, from the ground up, it's gonna cost so much more than if we do this plan here. It's there, and we're gonna have some of these other expenses anyway. And we also have budgeted in our plan for the future to do some of these things that we need in the other facilities. So I think it's in my opinion, it's short-sighted to say, well, we'll just, push that, let some other board, as a building project is, we've witnessed how hard it is to get off the ground and to start over, and then not even have a place to put it. We'd have to, take parking and then figure out what we're gonna do for parking somewhere else. In my opinion, it's so short-sighted, so I'm gonna support this. I know it's a lot of money. Maybe I'm naive, but I'm hoping that it comes in under this. They've put in their contingency, and if it comes in there 5%, we've almost paid for what F3, or, the difference is paid for. And maybe I'm naive, but I'm gonna support F4.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think anybody has any doubts where my position on this. But at a minimum, I don't want to leave tonight without at least passing F3. So I would ask everybody to consider, if we vote down F4, that we leave ourselves the option of still talking about F3 before we leave tonight. So I don't know how we can do that. But I keep thinking about this building, the one we're sitting in right now. And I've been involved in this. I was involved in the tax referendum. I was involved, a long time in the process of building, and I keep hearing over and over again how the county made a mistake by not building this building so we could go up. And I'm thinking, when I look at these as F3, we are doing the exact same thing in the new building as we did in this building. We're talking a difference in price of $6.3 million. And the whole project is $44 million, of which $20 million was money given to us by the federal government. And I would argue that in the 2 years plus that we've had that money, we probably earned $2 million in interest on that money. So I could easily argue that we are building this building around 50 cents on the dollar of Tazewell County money. So I support, for all the reasons and for the future of Tazewell County, I hope we don't make the same mistake again by not putting that other floor on this building for $6.3 million. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bill?
Much of what Nick just said, I was planning on saying, which makes me feel good, because when Nick says it, I generally agree with him, and I agree with him this time, like pretty much always. I did want to point out that we have, I think many times in the past, on our building projects, actually come in under budget. At least we have had some portion of our contingency funds still left in every building project that I'm aware of in the last, say, 20 years or so. There haven't been a lot of them, but we've done a very good job of making sure that we're not increasing what we're spending over what we decide to spend. Now, personally, I think that the $44 million is affordable. I understand it's not what we budgeted for to begin with. Frankly, no matter what it is that we do, whether 37 million, 44 million, I'm going to be continuing to try to convince all of you to do what we can to get that fourth courtroom as soon as we can. Whether it means that we're going to be starting on an addition in just a couple of years, or it means that we're going to finish one of those shelled out courtrooms in just a couple of years. But I think that the F4 proposal is the best one, because that additional courtroom that I'm going to be working to get all of you to agree to down the road, it's going to be cheaper under F4 than it is under F3. Because with F3, in order to build any additional courtrooms, we're actually building entirely new building space. Whereas with F4, we've already got it shelled, and if we want to build one courtroom at a time, we can do that. We can decide that we have 2 million, or maybe at that point it's 3 million. Who knows how long it takes us to do it. But we'll have the ability to do this in a piecemeal basis that will cost us less. And I think that, in terms of planning for the future, makes a lot more sense than saying, okay, we'll build exactly what we need today, or actually not even exactly what we need today. We'll build a little less than what we need today, and then we'll pay more down the road because we built less today, which is not exactly what we did previously, which was a huge mistake. It's actually worse. So I think F3, although I appreciate the desire to save taxpayer money, I think F3 is misguided and actually costs more taxpayer money in the long run. And so I'm urging everyone to vote for F4, because that actually is the most cost-effective way to do this. You build for the future, you don't build for the present, and you definitely don't build for the past. F3 is the past, it's not the present, not even the present. So we definitely need to go with F4.
Jay, and then Mike.
So can we guarantee that we're gonna empty the 2 buildings we're trying to get out of and not have to continue to maintain those?
Yes.
Great.
Mike?
I have a question on the additional floor in the jail here. Where did we make a mistake? What would we put on the 4th floor? All the courtrooms? You know, and the jail's not full right now, so I don't see a mistake in not building the 4th floor. Where do Dick and Bill, where do you see that mistake at?
I think that the plan initially, as I recall, I was not one of the board members, I was just the chief civil assistant, but as I recall, the plan was to have criminal courts in this building as soon as we could manage it. And the plan was initially to have expansion upwards, and the courts could have been added on as an additional floor. Because we took away whatever additional structural needs would have had to be part of the building, there was no ability to build up to an additional floor. So you can look at it as being simply a reprioritization by the board. I personally look at it as a mistake, but there can be differences of opinion, obviously. I certainly didn't mean, for any of you who were on the board back then, I didn't mean by my comments to criticize you for what you did. I think that you did not take the option that would have been best, but you didn't know at that point what exactly was going to happen. But I think that now we do know, with this situation, that we're not addressing our current needs if we go with F3 as opposed to F4.
We agree to disagree.
So I was on the board when we built this facility, and we did cut things out, thinking we were going to save money, and there's been a lot of regret over the years. This was estimated, if I remember right, to come in at $18 million. Bids at the time came in at $14 million. And if we do pass F4 tonight, I would like Wool to maybe design 1 or 2 more courtrooms so that if we're still in that budget, we can add that 4th courtroom at that time, if we come in under. Other comments, Greg?
I was wondering if Mike D or Mindy could talk about the money side of this as far as, I mean, I've heard a couple figures here that I don't think are quite accurate, and CIP funds, leftover revenue, interest rates. Just kind of give us a breakdown as we know it today. Thank you.
Okay,
be happy to go over the financials. In the packet, it includes the source of funding for the proposed F4 option. This would include the roughly $34.4 million that we had already set aside as cash in the CIP fund in the FY24 budget. As mentioned, as we've gone through the process, we found that that wasn't sufficient to cover what we would need to build the F3 or F4 option. The additional funds would come from two sources. One, we significantly under budgeted how much revenue we would have in interest income from the CIP fund. With the treasurer being able to invest it, we believe that it's trending toward having an extra $2 million in that fund for this year. So that takes care of part of the difference. The other difference would be a transfer from the general fund of roughly $7.6 million. Now, highlight the effects of that shortly. One item, as we discussed, is the current facilities and continuing to make the improvements that we need within the existing buildings that we have. During the budget process, significant funds was set aside to complete our 5-year capital improvement plan. And to date, we still have $12.2 million within that account to be able to do those capital improvements. We also, within the budget, could move an additional $500,000 to help pay for additional capital improvement plans throughout this process, and that would put it at 12.7. I'd also note that through the CIP fund for FY25, we're estimating that it would generate an additional $1.3 to $1.5 million in interest. Those funds could also be used for additional capital facility improvements without affecting the general fund. It was mentioned that we're reviewing our costs in that we have currently in the CIP fund. So I'm happy that PJ here has been helping us with that process, reviewing what we had put in our capital plan, going on roofs, getting contractors, and making sure that the estimates that we have within our capital improvement plan are good, and that we are also budgeting the right projects at the right time. So that continues to be ongoing. I certainly think, talking with them, there may be additional need, if that's $1 million, $1.5 million, just setting it up and showing on this slide where we could add additional funds to accommodate what they determine. The net effect on the general fund. So if we were to transfer out the funds from the general fund, it would leave $20 million left in the general fund balance, and that would put our percentage of balance as expenditures at 50%. This is very similar to what we had done in the FY24 budget process, looking at the budget book with the 14 million transfer. That took us down to just below 50%, and so this seeks to do the same. Our financials have come back stronger than we expected at the end of last year, and we're estimating where our balances will be at the end of this year, and now have gone through with departments on their budget requests, and based on the information and transfers, we would end FY25 still with a 50% balance. Now that is excluding contingency funds. We would still have those budgeted. So generally speaking, it is rare that we use any kind of significant contingency funds. We're saying that leaving that out, if you take that in, it would drop it down a little bit more. A little bit was talked about previous projections on revenues and expenses and crossing the line. We did a little bit of historical analysis on both our revenues and expenses. And when you average it out, our revenue growth over the last 10 years is averaging 6.13%. Put a couple items on here to highlight the reasons. Way back when, before we had online sales, local governments could rely on the local sales tax as a significant revenue source to be able to help with operations. As online sales began to grow, then that began to eat away at it, with state law not requiring that the online retailers collect that online tax. That began to continually erode to the revenue base for local governments. And for those of you that are here during that time, it certainly saw the effects that had. And I would say that was likely a significant contributor to previous projections over expenses and revenues. Since that, the law passed, now collecting online sales tax, that has had a very positive impact for us and all local governments. Right now, just looking from 2019 to what our 2023 actuals were, we actually had a 47.5 increase in the public safety sales tax. And highlighting a few other items, income tax, certainly all of us have felt inflation, but there's also been increases in salaries throughout that process. With income tax, it's increased over 42% during the same time. And put another revenue in here that was a new source. 2019, there wasn't the cannabis tax, and since then, that's roughly 500,000 additional revenue that we're getting every year. So when, just highlight that to give little color to where we were and some of the challenges we had beforehand without having online sales tax, and some of the positive effects where we're now able to budget and complete a lot of the capital improvement plans that had got put off during that time. And also adjustments to salaries that we needed to make to help make sure that we could retain our good workforce. So that's where our revenue had trended. On the expense side, it has averaged 2.15% expense growth. Now, as far as we are today, like I said, we have the budget numbers from all departments, and revenues are budgeted to be $42.1 million. Expenses are budgeted to be at 40.1. So that leaves the $2 million surplus over the budget. Now, we would still, again, budget for contingency, but it's not having the contingency numbers in there. It also doesn't include transfers to buildings. So I had mentioned this year we would transfer $500,000 to the general fund, and would expect every year going forward that we're going to need to continue to budget for capital projects. And that could certainly be in the $500,000 to $1 million range. We're certainly trying to catch up, which does a lot of good after we've completed our 5-year capital plan, to do a lot of the projects we've had in the queue between windows and roofs and air handlers. But we will ongoing have some of that transferred. Other items would be the expense for the security for the 2 buildings. So as we continue to maintain 2 buildings, we would have that estimated $300,000 to $400,000 expense to come out between them. So when I say surplus, I mean that want to keep in mind that we do have needs of maintaining our building that would come from that, and there are some costs that we know, but it is positive that we are having a surplus right now. And also highlighting for the 10-year average of budgeted expenses used. So we budget 100% for all salaries, but we know that there's going to be turnover. Whether someone retires, takes another position somewhere else. We also have to budget what we think we may need to spend for expenses, for repairs, buildings, different items. Sometimes we use all that budget, and sometimes we don't have to. So the average is 94%. And when you look at our expenses of $40 million, that's again $2.3 million that by no means can I guarantee that we would have savings, but the historical trend would show that we usually spend under what our budget is to that tune. So if our revenues and expenses continue to trend how it does, we are in a very good position to be able to continue to take care of our buildings and take care of the operations that we have. There's questions as far as utilities and different items for the new buildings. Talking with the architect, does believe that with no longer using the old post office and Tazewell building, the utilities would be roughly a wash when you're moving into the new building. We're also getting out of buildings that would have high maintenance costs and repair costs, and with the new building, we would start having more cosmetic items in 8 to 10 years, major systems likely even farther from that point. So it does set us on a good foot as far as future capital improvements on our buildings. So we have looked at different models, and we have to go off the information we have now based on the state laws that are in effect now, and that's where we primarily look at our projections. And so with this information, we would be able to maintain that 50% fund balance, and we project for FY '25 that we would continue to have that budget surplus.
Any questions? Thanks, Mike and Mindy, for pulling those numbers together. Any more questions? Are we ready to vote on F4? Max?
Are we gonna hear from Mindy or no?
We certainly can. Would you like to?
Yes.
Okay. Mindy, you wanna come forward? What do you wanna ask? I mean, is there something specific you wanna?
Yeah, well, you want me to talk?
Yeah.
So, we created a finance department, and it
Right.
wasn't inexpensive to do so. We carved out duties from the chief fiscal officer in order to do so several years ago, at your request. And, so, yeah, a decision like this, which doesn't come every day, which has a huge impact on Tazewell County and our criminal justice system and our finances, I'd sort of like to hear from the person who's running the finance department.
Fine, yeah, they work together on those numbers. Go ahead, Mindy.
Yeah, thank you. That's the first thing I would say, is that all those numbers that Mike put together, we worked on them together and have communicated throughout the process. So I don't have any issue with anything that we just showed. I think that's all correct information. So we did analysis looking at the past 10 years, looking at what our expenses were, what our revenues were, and came up with trends. And I would say that based on our current trends, that where your revenues are growing faster than your expenses, we have a healthy fund balance currently. And if we stay on that same trajectory, I'd say yes, financially, the building is affordable. And we'll be able to, over time, build back up our reserves that will help us, that we'll need in order to be able to complete the building project. But I also do think in my role as finance director, or whichever one you want to look at, that there are some things that we have to think about, which would be some of our unknowns. So we know that we're going to spend $7.6 million of general fund balance and move that over to CIP. It does leave our general fund balance at 50% of expected future expenditures. And that is on the lower end of the range that we traditionally feel comfortable with. So I think that we just would be remiss if we didn't think about what that might mean for us moving forward should we come upon potentially a hard time in some way financially. So I think Mike did talk a little bit about that. We have building costs of $44 million to construct this building. That's barring any major unforeseen potential problems or hiccups along the way. And I do think that we have a great team in PJ Hare and Holt, and I think that they have been really good about trying to give us good information. But I also have heard them acknowledge that, it's a building project. You could run into something that you don't expect or foresee. So that's just looming out there. I can't quantify it. It's just something I think that as a board, when you're making a decision, it's something that you need to think about. So we're spending $44 million on the building, but I do think it's also important to really think about the cost to complete 3 shelled-out courtrooms. That is going to cost us approximately $6 million, and although we can decide when we are going to spend that money and do that over time, which I think gives us margin, and that's a great thing. I just think we also need to consider that as part of our committed cost on the project, because the project is not just $44 million. To use it the way you want, it's closer to 50. And so I think that should just be considered that way. I certainly cannot say if we are going to have a financial downturn. I can't say that there's going to be anything that's going to happen financially that will be hard for the county, but I also can't say that It won't, and I can't say that it will, and none of us can really do that. So, based on F4 funding requiring us to go down to 50% of fund balance, I do think it's my job to just throw out what potentially could be pitfalls down the road. And I do think that Mike did a great job of talking about some of that. The county, potentially, if we end up having to spend more money or something falls off, like with revenues or something like that, which that's just important to note. Revenues is not something that we can control. We cannot go about increasing revenues. That's just, those will be what they will be. If they fall off, we can't do anything to change that. So the way that we would respond to potential downturn or some sort of financial situation that would come to us would be us having to look at other ways to potentially decrease expense. So that would mean that we should think about what would that look like, so when you make a decision, you are knowing fully like what you're choosing. And so I would say these are a couple of things that you would think about. If you're looking at expenses, you could continue to spend down your general fund, and you have $6.7 million between where we'll be and where 33% of expected future costs or expenses would be. So there's that. That's one area. I feel like I should just point out like what your choices would be. You could pull back CIP fund balance, and that would mean foregoing future capital expenditures, and that is something that maybe has been not thought about for a while. So now we're starting to invest in some of those things, and so I just think those are choices that you would, be able to make, but that is one of them. Now that doesn't mean that you can't put money back into CIP and start that back up again. You certainly can. We can make adjustments to personnel costs, so we could make decisions in that way that would keep our personnel costs down or change something. You could cut spending on technology, which is currently an initiative and something that the county is doing. And you could take on debt, which is not typically something the county likes, but it is an option if you are in certain circumstances. It's not always a bad thing, but not really something that we tend to look at. So just all that being said, my concerns are just wanting to convey to you that in this role, I don't want to just give the assumption that everything will go along just as planned. I think sometimes you have to think about how it maybe won't. And those are the things I thought I should point out.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
There's always the possibility of something happening. Always. But it's prudent for us, I think, to go ahead with this, because one thing that's going to happen is society is becoming more angry, with less civility, wanting to lash out. Our current facility is terrible as far as accommodating that, and that is one thing that's not going to change. It's going to get worse in the future, and we need to be prepared for that. The Tazewell County we knew 10 years ago, we know today, is not going to be the Tazewell County for the citizens 10 or 15 years ago. I guarantee you it's going to get worse. And our current system, as it is, we cannot afford not to spend the money and make it safe and healthier for our residents. I believe that just looking at this is COVID dollars too that we're supposed to have in here as far as the healthier aspect. You look at that courthouse as far as the congestion of people and the possibility of contamination. It just makes no sense not to do this and protect our society, because it's getting a lot worse. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Just as an aside, of the top 20 counties in the state of Illinois, Tazewell County is the only one that doesn't have the back hallway security and keep people separate. So, Sam and then Greg.
Would you repeat that? And we're the only one of the top 20 that what?
Don't have security with the back hallway and the segregation of the those in custody. So,
our security, they do great, but it sucks.
It does. Sam and then Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just want to remind everybody in this room that we are here to provide and collect just what the county needs to survive. And we wouldn't even be talking about this building unless we got these funds from a federal government who, as of right now, can't even pay the interest on the money that they borrowed. Okay? So in the beginning, I really wasn't even for building this, because we wouldn't even be talking about it unless we had the disaster we had with COVID-19. So, I just want to remind people that I'm willing to support $34 million that we agreed to as a board to begin with, because it satisfies what we need. We've heard from everyone that this building will satisfy what we need right now. If we want to expand in the future, I think we should leave that up to my children. I'm only 31. I have to live in this county for a lot longer unless my taxes get too high to live here. And, you know, our numbers look good right now. We went through a boom time after COVID. We have an impending recession right now with skyrocketing inflation. And the real inflation numbers are 18%. I want to remind people that bad things could happen, and most likely they're going to happen. If we spend this extra $10, $15 million in a couple years, we might be in bad shape financially, where we have to go back and raise taxes. And all that's going to do is drive more of our taxpayers out, so we have to get more out of less. Thank you.
Right?
So we do anything short of F4 requires an additional build. What do? You build one, you build two, or you build 3 courtrooms, or you build each one separately. Each one is going to, go up geometrically almost in cost. So in essence, if you're going to, it may be a tough pill to swallow to come up with another $30 million to build 3 more courtrooms, because that seems to be what the going cost is today, because that'll be the 3 additional. So F4 appears to be the cheapest option by far because of the shell space, even though the finished product may be, as many are saying, close to 50 all in. If you did the additional build, you're 60 to 70 million all in. So I think F4 is the cheapest.
Max?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to amend the resolution and replace the F4 schematic design with F2, which is the $34 million building within the budget.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay, Max, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, there was really only 2 options within budget. I think that we worked really hard to get that budget. I think that the resolution that was presented to us, again, is $10 million over budget. $68 million in courthouse renovations, decreasing fund balances, $24 million in taxpayer funds. I'm glad that I got a second for discussion. I think that this does not have to end here tonight. Just because you turned down F4 does not mean we have to end here tonight. We heard from the state's attorney. He's even fine with F3, and maybe if we work with F2 a little bit, we can work it out. So that is, again, my plea to you.
Any other comments?
Move to call the question.
Question's been called. All those in favor of calling the question? It's a superior motion, so all those, correct?
Correct.
All those in favor of calling for the question,
Continue.
signify by aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Discussion will continue. Let's see, who did, John?
Jesus Christ.
I've had the unique, ability, and I appreciate the appointment in coming into a lot of this discussion late, and had an opportunity as best I could to try to cram information from different sources, just to be, hopefully make the best decision, I think, in this situation.
And before you talk, you need to discuss the F2, the amendment that's on the floor. If it's broader than that, we can talk about that in a minute.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, I may have gone too far. Yeah.
Any other discussion on the F2 amendment that's been made? All those in favor of F?
Yeah.
Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had a pit in my stomach since I walked in here, and I'm not sick. It's because there's three things I really prioritize in my life. One's God, one's being a fiscal conservative, and one's being a proponent of criminal justice and law enforcement. I served 8 years as assistant for courts and law enforcement for Northern Illinois, 38 counties.
Speak to the amendment, please.
Yeah, well, it is on the amendment. It's why I struggled to second it, but I wanted to. So I came in here tonight supportive of F2 or F3. I'm still a little confused. I asked a lot of courtroom questions, but I'm still confused a little bit. F4, I think,
F2, can you focus on F2?
Well, the discussion on the table is why F2 might be an alternative to F4.
Okay.
You would have to admit that, right, Dave? So it's legitimate. There was a lot of similarity between Michael and Mindy's presentation, but there were some differences. If you listen carefully in a fiscal way, Mindy provided some risk, some financial risk that I didn't hear Michael say. I agree with everything Michael said, but I agree with everything Mindy said. I was the county auditor the last time we had a recession. I was in my 20s, I got elected, and the first budget out of the, we did it the normal way.
Focus on F2.
Well, this is why I got a pit and I've been struggling. And if you want to shut me off, and I'll vote no. But if you want me to explain, I'll try to make it brief.
Thank you.
So, Bill Barrick and Helen Gustafson from Pete Mark Mitchell came into my office and said, I'd finished all my work with all the department heads ready to present to the county board and tentative budget. And they said, we got a recession. There was a recession in 1980 for you guys that remember. And so you got to cut $1.5 million out of the general fund. They had already submitted their budgets. They already had been asked to be conservative and tight and not put any fat in there. And we didn't have any choice. So I met with Danny Bell, the chairman, and we went back to the department heads and county officers, and they cut $1.5 million out of the budget. It wasn't easy, and they hated me. About a month later, ready to go, tentative budget was done, and the two from Pete Mark Mitchell visited me again. You got to cut another $1 million out. I said, it's already bare bones. They said, it's not about expenses. We've talked about that tonight. There could be unanticipated expenses. But the treasurer knows, and Mindy knows, there's also a potential problem with revenues. I don't know if you watch the stock market, but stock market analysts will tell you we've entered a recession, not there might be one.
Russ, can I pull you back in? Speak to the amendment that's on the floor.
Okay, so I had to go back to them. And the board unanimously passed the budget. And there were department heads and county officers who had to lay people off. They had to cut salaries. They had to eliminate things that they thought were essential. So if you think you're gonna go cry in your soup about losing one courtroom, think about if you have to cut people that you've worked with for 30 years and they're essential in your mind to your business. And so that's the kind of thing that I was faced with, and that's the kind of thing I remember, and that's why I would love to support F5-4, but I can't right now. Thank you.
Nick?
F2 keeps us in the old post office.
We have cash in the bank, folks, for this building. I respect each and every one of you but I can't think of an easier decision when the money's in the bank and we just need to move forward. We've been working on this process for years, and my hair used to be the color of John's. But are there any other questions on F2? All those in favor of F2 signify by aye.
Aye.
Can you raise your hands? All those opposed? Motion fails. Back to F4. Questions on that, John? Go ahead.
I'll continue, and I guess I did lose my train of thought, and I could have just finished by saying I wasn't going to vote for F2, but I think to catch back where I was, of course, there's a lot of information to put together. I wasn't around for the initial $34 million discussion, agreement, vote. You know, we've gained interest over the last year, you know, so we're pretty close to F3. I think that may have been a better motion than F2 anyway, but different discussion there as well. I think that the challenge when you look at long-term thinking, and you know, you need to do that as a business owner, and so looking at F4, it does seem that it is looking more forward-thinking. But I'm also challenged because we're talking another $6 to $7.5 million to actually finish it. And based on Mike's numbers there, if we're $2 million under budget every year with, you know, maybe another 500 to $1 million need to go in different places, that's $1 million a year. It's 6 to 7.5 years before we finish that shell space. We also haven't really discussed tonight, but we do have the circuit clerk that would need to get an addition done there. And does it make sense to put the other courtrooms at that time, because we're going to have to do another addition at some point, unless he decides to stay where he's at with that part of the division. So even F4 would need that extra addition. You know, it's been a difficult, I don't know that I'd say I've hit my stomach, but I think it is a difficult decision when talking about this kind of money. Yes, we can write the check for it. Will things change? You know, hopefully I'm young enough, I'm not 31 anymore, my hair's probably getting closer to gray or leaving me, but you know, hopefully I'll be blessed to be able to serve this community for a long time. And this is just the start, and so, you know, I will have to make decisions on that building then and how to get it built out. So, you know, I struggled in going back and forth. I think to me, and I know we're not voting on this, I think to me F3 would be the financial best decision, unless we're going to make a decision, and I think we should do one of the two. And I'm not suggesting we spend more money, but finish it instead of the F4, that is. Spend all the money. Instead of taking the $7 million out of the general fund, leaving that there to continue to gain money, take the loan. I know nobody wants to take a loan, but for the full amount to finish that space, or do what we've got with the F3, not shell it and build. But I think we are committing that 6 to 7.5 million tonight, even though it's not on the screen, right? It's 50 whatever million. So we are committing to it, or at least presumably, if I'm around still, and for those that are, we are at some point committing to that. So, you know, I think all that to say, I will vote against F4 tonight unless it is to actually build and complete the entire project. If not, I think that we should be voting on F3. Thanks.
So you support G2?
Not necessarily G2. I don't know what that looks like with the circuit clerk, but I think that leaving circuit clerk F4 but finished. Or
Mr. Chairman,
or F3.
Can we ask the circuit clerk to make a few comments if he wishes? We keep talking about
You need to come up and use the mic if you want to talk. We need to keep in mind too that we are dangerously close on having too much in our reserves like you mentioned, Sam, we're collecting taxes to do the function of government. Tonight we're talking about building the infrastructure so that we can do that. If our fund balances get, I mean, at one time they were over 100% clearly illegal. If so, we could have been sued for overtaxing, and it gets really complicated with the PTEL system, so. Yeah, go ahead, John.
And just to clarify, I'm not saying I'm not supportive of voting for a building, and I think that you're right on the funds that we do need to allocate them somewhere.
I guess, thank you, Mr. Crawford, for asking what my opinion was. I appreciate it. I guess I would say I've tried to save money all along with this thing. So I said what I needed in there was my traffic office. As far as what happens down the road, I don't know. I don't have the same crystal ball that a lot of people seem to have, so I don't know what's going to happen. So at whatever time we decide to do F whatever, then I guess I would speak at that point about what I need to have over there. But at this point, I've still tried to do my level best to make sure that I took no more space in that building than I absolutely had to have now. So, does that answer your question?
It does, and I used to train circuit clerks for a living, and they have to have traffic with this court. So Link is doing the very least participation possible.
We have to collect the money, or else that'll be gone. So, thanks for asking, Russ.
You're welcome.
All right, any other comments or questions? Let me just, so we have the sheriff, the state's attorney, the chief judge, the presiding judge, the public defender, and probation supporting this. Daniel Burnham said make no small plans. And Bill, you hit it spot on when you said we need to build for the future and not the present. I just talked to somebody tonight from the city of Pekin who said when they built that across the street or across the way here, they built it for what their needs were then. And from day one, every office was full. So they had to buy the funeral home across the street to accommodate their needs. So I just would encourage everybody to be visionary, to meet the needs for decades to come. This is the least expensive option in the long term. So, if there are no other questions,
I'd make a motion for F3.
thanks, wait till the last. There's a motion for F3. Can I get a second? Second by Harris. Any discussion on an F3? All those in favor of F3 signify. Roll call.
Atkins?
No.
Crawford?
Aye.
Deppert?
No.
Mark Goddard? Sam Goddard?
Yes.
Graff?
No.
Hall?
No.
Harris?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Josting?
No.
Longfellow?
No.
Mennel?
No.
Mingus?
No.
Nelms?
No.
Pageant? Frail? Rich Stimson?
No.
Schmidtall?
Yes.
Schneider?
No.
Sin?
No.
Stahl? Motion fails. Back to the F4 version. Any other questions? Do a roll call on this. John?
Crawford?
Aye.
Deppert?
Yes.
Mark Goddard? Sam Goddard?
No.
Graff?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Harris?
No.
Hopkins? Josting?
Yes.
Longfellow?
Yes.
Mennel?
Yes.
Mingus?
Yes.
Nelms?
Yes.
Pageant? Frail? Rich Stimson?
Yes.
Schneider? Schmidtall?
No.
Schneider? Sin?
Yes.
Stahl? Atkins?
Yes.
Motion passes. So So guys, I know, and gals, I know this has been a controversial process in some manner. I thank you for your patience. This is a several-year process. I look forward to see what's coming. And you know what? We did this in a manner that I think well respected the citizens of Tazewell County. So if there's no other business, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.